What is up, guys? It is Robert at Gaming with Me, and welcome to a discussion that might be a little controversial. I'm not too sure. Um, as you can see by the title, I personally don't feel stories are important in video games. I don't think so at all, actually. That's not to say at all. I have to also explain that. It's not to say that I believe that they can't enhance a game or anything. It totally can. Like, a great story could make a great game even fucking better. It could make it fantastic. And there are games out there that are all about the story, and that's perfectly fine. That's what they do. You know what I'm saying? Like a Telltale game. I mean, I know they're technically kind of closed down, um, but the Walking Dead, the Tales Among Us, the Tale Among Us. Sorry, the Wolf Among Us, the Tales from the Borderlands. I was combining the two. Those Telltale games. Also stuff like Until Dawn. A lot of point and click adventures in general. A lot of the Naughty Dog games. I think they're kind of the best when it comes to story driven games, like The Last of Us and the Uncharted franchise. I think they have been able to seamlessly create gameplay and the narrative combined perfectly. I mean, I think Naughty Dog is top notch when it comes to that type of style. The reason why I say stories aren't important is for the simple fact that it's a video game. And in the end of the day, it's a game. A game is something that is interactive, something that you're playing, something that needs your, inputs. And stories, for the most part, don't need your inputs. They just are told to you. And that's why, for me personally, I've never seen them as important. And no, that's not just the end of the video. There's a lot, there's more that I want to talk about. But I just feel, and I know that some people bring that up, but I'm not trying to be here like, oh, I don't like stories. Again, some of my favorite games of all time are story-driven games. I will bring back up The Last of Us. I love The Last of Us. I think it's fantastic. There's a lot of games that, honestly, in a way, are just a story. Some games aren't as interactive, and they're all about the story. Like, for instance, like a David Cage game with Detroit Become Human. That's very story-heavy. It's all about the story. And that works, that works. If you're making a game that is all about 100% the story and like 10% gameplay, I know that's 110%. My math is great, but to me, that's fine, and there's nothing wrong with that. I just feel it doesn't need to be a mandatory thing to make a good story or a story at all, because in my opinion, a bad or an unmemorable story or anything like that doesn't make a game any worse either. As long as the gameplay is nice and tight and it's great and it's fun, the story could be absolute garbage. I could be like, who fucking cares? What's this bullshit ass story? And then I play the game and it's fine. Sure, I guess that would make it some pacing issues, and you'd have to go through cutscenes or dialogue that is very bad to get to the good gameplay, but at least the gameplay is really solid. I don't think that makes it a bad game. One series that I have on this channel, if you're new, is called Back at the Backlog. It's a series I definitely think you should check out, which is, funnily enough, it's kind of a storyline-driven series with skits and stuff talking about games that are off my backlog. One game that I recently beat was The Legend of Zelda Link's Awakening. That was the last episode. And the whole thing with Link's Awakening that I really loved was actually the story. And it's not even a major part of the game necessarily. The story isn't shoved down your throat or anything. It's actually very minimal. But what it does is pretty damn powerful with the ending. I'm not going to spoil it, but the ending really got me, and I was genuinely surprised at how much it invested me in that. And there is minimal dialogue, there's minimal cutscenes, there's not a lot. But there are games that do that, and Link's Awakening is one of them. And yes, because of that, it did enhance the game itself. But if the story also was really bad and I didn't care about it, I'd still think it was pretty great. For me, I've always just been a gameplay first kind of guy, which I don't get how people aren't like that, especially if you're playing a video game. I'm also a huge moviegoer. I go to the movies at least 3 times a week. I've about to go in a few hours to go watch another movie, The Gentleman. And to me, like, seeing so many movies kind of also revealed to me that a lot of writers in the video game industry aren't very good at making a story. And to be fair, what it probably is also, it's tough to craft both seamlessly gameplay and a story. In a way, it almost collides. With movies, for instance, I mean, it's all about the story. There's no interaction at all with the movie. You know, you're watching it and that's it. Yeah, for an action movie, you could probably enjoy the action sequences, that's fine. But if it's a drama or something, you know, if the story's not good, if the characters aren't well developed, it's shit. You know, it becomes boring, it becomes monotonous, and it becomes bad. The movie is bad. It didn't do what it's supposed to do. A video game, if the story's all nice and well, but to get to the next cutscene, you have to do some shit. It's shit. It's gonna be a broken pile of mess. And you know what I mean? No story could save a bad game. A bad game, something that you interact with, if the controls are shit and the gameplay shit, you may not want to go to that next cutscene, no matter how fucking awesome the cutscene is, you know? A lot of players demand these long games. You know, RPGs can go up to 60 to 90 hours. I saw Persona 5 is almost 100 hours long. 100 hours is, I mean, an unbelievably long amount of time. And to write 100 hours worth of dialogue, obviously it's not literally 100 hours, but a ton of fucking dialogue. At some points, a lot of it's not going to be very good. And that's not to say Persona 5's writing is bad by any means. That's not what I'm saying. But what I am saying is that at some point, they have to pattern out the dialogue. And I think that's one thing that I think, for me personally, why I kind of see video games as just not the greatest storytelling form, because a lot of it has to be padding to get to these absolute crazy amount of number of hours that you have to get through. You have to write so much, and a lot of it's going to be almost unnecessary, or just by the end of your adventure unmemorable. I could probably say an entire movie, like I love, you know, a lot of the Star Wars movies. I could probably say almost all of Jurassic Park or something. I could probably give you each line of dialogue for like Blade Runner 2049 or War for the Planet of the Apes, but there's no way in hell can I tell you, for instance, Dragon Quest Builders 2 that I'm playing. You know, it's written well, but in all reality, it's got no voice acting. So if you were to say it out loud, it doesn't sound very good. And I think that's the problem, is that video games are way longer. They're a completely different medium from movies. And so when you do have these longer type of games, a lot of times the writing just, if you voice act it, a lot of times it sounds stiff. It sounds unnatural. It sounds like a script. In dialogue, the way I've always seen it, dialogue can't feel like a script. If it sounds like a script, well, there's something wrong there. Then it's unnatural. It doesn't sound like they're actually saying it. And I feel like a lot of these people don't really watch good stories. That's not to say, I'm not trying to say, oh, I watch good stories. You don't. But I almost feel like there are times where people will bring up games where I'm just like, I mean, come on, man. Like, I could pass, for instance, Xenoblade Chronicles 2. I passed it and I'm like, I really got invested in the story, actually. But if I were to break it down, the voice acting, you know, a lot of the dialogue is pretty stiff. It doesn't sound natural. And it almost sounds Star Wars prequel-ish, which, if you're a fan of the prequel, I apologize. But, you know, a lot of that sounded unnatural. It sounded like a script. And that's why I've never really had many games. Yeah, there are games out there that dialogue, voice acting, all that is top-notch. And no matter what, like, it just blends story and gameplay perfectly. But for me, there's a lot more that just don't, and they've never worked for the most part. Like I said, even ones that are generally well written and well acted, well voice acted, all that, because they are 15, 20, 25, 40 hours long, you forget a lot of these plots and a lot of these subplots and so many dialogue. There's not things that stick out. For movies, there's so many times where you could just say a line, and while you can say lines from games, I mean, can you say, I mean, 5 hours worth of it? You know what I'm saying? Like, that's what I'm trying to say. Like, if you were trying to say, maybe if you can only say maybe 20 minutes or 5 minutes even of an hour and a half movie, I guess that would equate to 5 hours of like a 90-hour adventure, you know? But yeah, that's why I think story isn't necessarily important to a video game. Just because, well, I've seen so many of examples of it just not really meshing. And when it does mesh, it alone isn't that memorable because of how lengthy games are compared to a movie. And I would love to hear your thoughts. I know many people are going to disagree and they're going to say stories are what get them into games, but I would kind of love to see what other mediums you've listened to. Like what shows have you watched, maybe what movies? Just because, like, hey, you love it, but like, do you remember that one dialogue in that one section in that one place? Like, there's just so much dialogue that's in games. Thousands of lines at times, and it's just like a lot of it becomes unmemorable. It becomes a blur, and during the time while you're playing it, it's fine and it sounds really good. You're really impressed by it, but in the long term, they just aren't that memorable, and I think it's because of length. It's required technically dialogue, and not that it's required, but to make a storied game, it is required to have some good writing. And a lot of times it is good writing and they're technically good stories, but they just also become unmemorable. And that's why I just never found it as nearly as important as every other part of the game. The most important, to be fair, is kind of the controls. If the controls don't feel good, the whole game's going to not be very good. But yeah, guys, let me know down in the comments below, what do you think of stories in games? How does it affect how you enjoy a game or not enjoy a game? That's just kind of my opinion, you know what I mean? Again, it's not really important. It can boost the game dramatically, and if it's bad, it doesn't decrease it really at all, to be honest. So, let me know down in the comments below. Let me know what you think. I looked up person in YouTube stories in gaming, and a lot of people talk about the greatest stories in games. And while there are a ton of great ones, and there are a ton of memorable ones, again, I don't want to act like there's not a ton of memorable ones. I still love, like, again, The Last of Us, and there's a lot of other ones that are just funny dialogues. South Park Stick of Truth, just even something like Luigi's Mansion 3, very funny game, animation, the story is like a cartoon, and it's really funny. Or Borderlands 3 from last year also. The dialogue is hilarious, but I gotta admit, I don't remember a lot of the dialogue in Borderlands 3. Even though I laughed at a lot of it, I can't say it's that memorable. Because there were so many, they always are constantly talking, and when you're playing it for 30 hours, a lot of it starts to blur in your mind. But yeah, guys, let me know down in the comments below. I thought it'd be an interesting topic to talk about because it's a pretty important topic for gaming, I feel. Especially nowadays, everyone wants to push for that cinematic stuff and a lot of the story. And like when you play, 10 games in a year and they're all 10 hours apiece, 100 hours of story starts to blur, So yeah, guys, see you guys next time. Have a good one.
See, you fucking piss me off saying you understand, man. I don't think you think what you got did was wrong. Only reason you apologize is because your lies expired. Trying to wrap my head around why you would do this shit. If your feelings were dead, you wouldn't be contacted this bitch. And your reason is revenge. That's your reason for lying to your friends. The only man you actually gave a shit about your fucking head. Everybody turn your fucking back.